I remember the old days of focusing on the financial risks, and it was a huge improvement to move into the business process and the operations, but taking it to the strategic levels where we really made the most difference when I was in the internal audit area. So I want to take your thoughts now on the linkage with the business performance. So at a 30,000 foot level, how should a board be thinking about risk oversight and its linkage to business performance so that they can help their company grow and succeed? How common is it really for boards to provide this kind of oversight today?
Well, they know it's important, Jay. In the aftermath of the financial crisis, the SEC required boards to make disclosure of their risk, of the nature of their risk oversight process, and to articulate how they were organizing themselves for risk oversight. And that really sharpened the focus for a lot of boards. And that, boards know it's important. But what's interesting, the most recent public company corporate governance survey that was published by the National Association of Corporate Directors indicated, Jay, 4 areas that required the most improvement. The first one was recognizing opportunities and risk affecting performance. And the second one was monitoring strategic execution. The third one was the board being engaged in the formulation of strategy. And the last one was board risk oversight. So I think at a 30,000 foot level, Jay, that's a pretty good start for any board, whether it's public, private, or not-for-profit, to focus on those 4 areas as suggested in that survey.
Those are clearly some of the most important things that a board does. You've been a proponent for integrating risk with strategy setting, also with business planning, and then managing overall company performance. What resources are available? If I'm a board member and I want to understand these concepts and these linkages, what kind of resources might be available to help me do that?
Well, that's very interesting because I'm sure as you have found out as well, when I talk with directors, I ask them, what do you like? And they say, well, I like stuff that's concise. I like stuff that's crisp and something that is to the point. And what they often also say, I particularly like material written by active directors or active directors. So, with that in mind, I think the best thing out there, Jay, is about 8 years old, 9 years old, I guess, getting there. But it's still as relevant today as it was back then, and that's the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD Blue Ribbon Commission report issued in 2009. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely,
It's entitled Risk Governance, Balancing Risk and Reward. And it's filled with sage advice on how to organize for risk oversight. It's got principles in it that are timeless. They're just as relevant today as they were back then. I could give you a couple of examples for our listeners. The first 2 principles, one is the understand the key success factors to a company's success. And the second one is assess the risk inherent in the strategy. And so you look at those 2 principles, they're timeless because they give a board a very effective context for conducting its risk oversight. So I strongly recommend that publication by the NACD is very relevant. The second point I would suggest is the PBI Profitability Board Risk Oversight Meter. Profitability collaborated with the Board Institute to create a very easy-to-use tool to help boards facilitate and make more robust their self-assessment of their risk oversight process. This is something that, if you look at those 10 principles that the NACD set forth, one of them, and I think it's the last one, it talks about the importance of continuously assessing the effectiveness of your risk oversight process. And of course, it's a best practice to self-assess board effectiveness. And the board as a whole, individual committees, and individual members of the board. And risk oversight is no exception to that. And this tool can be very effective in helping boards self-assess their risk oversight process. It's aligned with how a lot of directors like to do self-assessment, identifies areas where the board is strongest in, areas where the board might want to talk about opportunity to improve. To find it, you just Google the Board Institute and get on that website, look under the Products tab, and you'll find the TBI Profitability Board Risk Oversight Meter. And Profitability, my firm, does not receive any compensation when a board decides to use that tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so even in 2009, the NACD and the Profitability TBI tool identified the self-assessment, which is so important. It's a very hot topic today. That guidance may not touch on some of today's hot topics around, culture or, cyber risk oversight, but the principles are there. And if you do a continuous assessment, as things change, you're going to be on top of all of the risks for your organization as a board.
Absolutely
Really important.